Welcome to the kill count, where we tally up the victims in all our favorite horror movies. Today we're looking at The Thing, which came out in 1982 and it was directed by John Carpenter as well and shit. And this movie is just, I like it and shit. And when this movie first came out and shit, people really didn't like it, saying it was nasty and shit. And all that type of stuff. So and very gory and shit for the time and shit, which it is and shit. So and it's still a very nasty movie and shit. But if you like all that shit and shit, this movie is for you and stuff. So and the characters are pretty damn good and shit. I really like Mac and shit, and the other people with this facility and shit. It's just great. I really like the Antarctic setting and shit. It makes it different and shit. But it's about these things, try to transform into other life forms that surround the shit. So why it's doing that. So and they fucking found out about this shit at the some Norwegian place and shit. So but how many people die in this movie? Let's find out and let's get to the kills. The movie begins
in space,
where we watch this spacecraft just now landing in and shit, about to crash into Earth as well and shit too. So then the movie lets us know that John Carpenter made it and shit, and that's why this movie is just so damn great to me and shit. So then we get the title card and shit, which always still looks good and shit. So then we go into Antarctica in 1982. So then we got to a dog and shit running across the snow and shit, and you're probably wondering right now why he's running and shit. That's because some Norwegians in this helicopter right now chasing it down and shit, trying to shoot it down and shit. So for some fucking reason. But anyway, though, it's trying to shoot it down and shit, and it just still gets away and shit swiftly and shit. So and it ends up running to this research facility and shit, which also has a bunch of guys in it right now looking like they're having fun and shit. So then we cut to Mac and shit, seeing what's going on outside and shit, and I call bro the group leader and shit. Then that dog ends up running to them and shit, and they seem pretty happy with it and shit. So this one guy steps out and shit and tries to pull a grenade and shit, but it ends up slipping out his hand and shit. Then he leaves his co-pilot buddy and shit to go try and find it and shit. He just ends up running away though and shit, while bro is still looking and shit. Then he ends up blowing up and shit. Then the other one opens fire and shit, hitting George in the leg and shit, and they all just run away. And Commander Gary saves the day by clumsily busting out that window and shit to shoot down bro and shit, and killing him too. So it's pretty fucked up and shit. But they all go put out the fire and shit and all that type of stuff. So then we cut to Clark and shit, saying that he's gonna adopt the dog and shit and all that type of stuff. So I'm finna tell you about all the characters in this movie because it'll help to get to know them going forward. But we already met George and shit because he got shot up by the Norwegian and shit, and then we cut to Copper and shit, stitching him up, helping him out and shit. So then we meet up with this guy named Windows and shit, a radio operator, and he hasn't been able to get a hold of nobody for 2 weeks and shit. So just really making Blair mad right now and shit. Then we see this other guy and shit roller skating down the hallway of this facility and shit and all that type of stuff. So until he hits his room and shit, skates in there and shit, and the bro's name is Niles and shit, and he's the station cook for the place and shit. And while the others are looking at one of the Norwegian bodies and shit, closing it up and shit, we meet this guy named Palmer and shit, which is a mechanic for the team also and shit. And there's also this guy named Charles and a few other people on this team and shit. Copper tells Mac to fly into the Norwegian station to try and find some answers and shit and all that type of stuff. So and they lift off going on and shit and leaving and shit. So later on that day in Antarctica, we cut to that dog exploring this new grounds and shit. So because it's always great to know where you're at and shit. Then bro walks in there and shit, where a guy is in that room and shit. Anyway, Mac and Copper arrive back at the place and shit and all that type of stuff. So anyway, they start looking and shit to see if they find anything and shit, but I don't think they really found anything. They all look at this thing that they found back at the Norwegian place and shit and just examine it. And then later on that night and shit, we got to Clark, putting that dog in the cage and shit and all that type of shit, putting it up. And when bro turns the lights off and walk away expecting nothing and shit, these other dogs start tripping out. And if you don't want to see a bunch of nasty shit, you better skip over the next 20 seconds. This dog's face just randomly fucking splits open for some damn reason and shit and all that type of shit. And then shit just start getting crazy and shit, where the thing is just, transferring and shit. So but it's still tripping out some more and shit, was spilling sticky shit on that dog. But they all hear the commotion and shit and goes check to see what it is and shit, and they find this shit in there, which I don't know what the hell that is, but they better do something about it and shit, which they do, and they like that shit ablaze and shit with the flamethrower and shit and all that type of shit. So yeah, cut to them looking at the shit, and Blair explains to us how he can imitate other life forms and shit, and they stopped it right on time before it fully, you know, transformed and stuff. So he got to windows and bandits and shit, putting that nasty shit up and shit and all that type of stuff. So yeah, and then they also don't notice that it still has a little bit more life to it shit. So yeah, and all that. That's when bro come back and shit and find them like this and shit. So yeah, and all that type of shit. So yeah, it's pretty fucked up and shit. So yeah, then we cut to them all just lighting a fire and shit and talking about how they're gonna survive this shit and all that type of stuff. You know, they try to see and test who's the thing and shit and all that type of stuff, but they find all the blood drained and shit. So yeah, then more people come in and shit to see what it is and shit. So yeah, and then this is where they all start to turn on each other and shit and all that type of shit. Suspicious. Now I guess they just burn up all the other bodies they had back there and shit for safekeeping. Then we cut to Fuchs studying, you know, Blair's journals and shit and all that type of stuff. So yeah, the lights go out and shit and all that type of stuff. Then a figure passes by him and shit and stuff, and then he goes outside to go see who it was and shit like that. So yeah, with Blair in his hand also. They finna go ask Blair if he's seen anything and shit. So yeah.
Blair, have you seen Fuchs?
I don't want to stay out here anymore. I want to come back inside.
And they end up finding him in this snow and shit. So yeah, and the 4th kill on the count. So yeah, alright, they all finna go inside now, and bro comes in and shit saying that Mac is a thing now and shit, just because he found someone torn up clothes and shit. So yeah, they get even more paranoid, even keeping Mac locked down and shit. So yeah, so that causes him to bust through another room with some dynamite and a flare and shit. So yeah, they still go at him and shit, and they all start fighting and throw his back and shit, and this actually ends up killing bro due to some heart attack that he had. So he'll go on the count then. Copper tries reviving bro and shit and all that type of stuff. So yeah, and then bro just eats his fucking hands for some damn reason. I don't know why either. But Mac tells the others and shit that they're about to get tied up to these chairs and shit to test who's the thing. But when the Chalice doesn't agree with it and shit, that's when Mac threatens to kill bro if he doesn't agree with it and do the shit. So yeah, and with that gun pointed to bro and shit, and he's so serious that he'll just kill you just to survive now and shit. Now since they learned what they're facing now and shit. So yeah, Mac shoots Clark when, you know, he tries to charge him with a scalpel and shit, you know. So yeah, and then Mac explains to the rest of the group and shit. Now he's about to test their blood, and he has everyone, you know, cut open their fingers and shit to get that blood in there. And then, you know, he tests his window shit, you know, he seems to be okay and shit. So yeah, and then, you know, Mac himself is good, and also, you know, Copper. But when he tests Palmer blood and shit, you know, his blood reacts all and shit and all that type of stuff. So yeah, he tries to get that flamethrower ready on time, because now he's transforming into the thing now and shit. So yeah, then his thing, you know, eats windows and shit, killing him as well and shit. And it's pretty violent death and shit. So yeah, it's pretty fucked up and shit. Anyway, now they're going to go try to find Blair and shit to go see where he's at and shit. So yeah, and they go into this little workshop area where bro looks like he been working on a little spaceship and shit. Then the Blair thing kills this guy and shit after he starts fucking with his face a bunch of shit too. So yeah, and then we can also put Blair on the couch now, since it's been a thing for the longest now. We cut to Niles walking and shit, and since we never see bro again, we move on to the couch. And we cut to Max sitting here and shit, all that type of shit after he survived all that shit and all that type of stuff. Then we cut to, you know, Charles coming in and shit with Max confronting him and shit, and then the movie ends with, you know, we watching this facility burn down and shit. So yeah, how many people died in this movie and stuff? Why, you know, these things are running around and shit in this cold ass Antarctica weather? Let's find out, and let's get to the numbers. I counted 12 kills in the thing, and since this movie only had all men in the movie, it's only a all blue pie chart and shit. So yeah, it's always good and shit. And with a runtime of 108 minutes and shit, that leaves us with a kill on average every 9 minutes even. So yeah, it's always great. I'll give the Golden Chainsaw the coolest kill to Copper, because, you know, it's just something different. I ain't never counted nothing like that. So yeah, I'm gonna show you for lamest skill, we can go to Norris in that heart attack, because it's pretty damn lame. But that's it though. This came out in 1982 and shit. Still a pretty great movie if you're into seeing all that blood and shit. If you're not, it's not for you. But yeah, next week, I guess, you know, New Rough Films just came out with You're Dead Too. which is a sequel to the movie that came out in 2023. So I'll look at that, and I'll also will be looking at the original Your Dad, which will be next week. And I will cover the second movie. I know I'm late and shit. Don't worry. Don't worry. I know. But I gotta cover the first one first, cause it wouldn't feel right for me to cover, the second movie first and shit. But yeah, the next week is Your Dad Part 1. But yeah. But till next time though, I'm Terrell. This has been the Kill Guy. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video and stuff and all that type of stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for supporting me and shit as well and shit. Getting me to 150 subscribers and stuff like that. I'm almost at 300, man. So yeah, I really appreciate y'all for that. And also, thank y'all for getting that Slenderman kill count to 1K after like 10 months now, I think. So yeah, that was back then when I really didn't know what I was doing, and I was still learning, which I'm still learning now. But yeah, thank you guys so much for getting that video to 1K and just supporting me, watching the videos, and subscribe if you like this video. Okay, but yeah, thanks everyone. Be good people. See you next week.